Tonight, the super high-tech Stormwatch faces down its most formidable enemies, the Neanderthals. Green Arrow has opinions on Occupy Wall Street, and they definitely aren't good. And Bleeze of the Red Lanterns goes full Huey Lewis and learns all about the power of love. All that and more tonight on the not-so-new 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 44 of the Not-So-New 52. I am your host and it's the 4th of July. There is nothing more American than the 4th of July, and I know this show takes place on a 10-year delay, but back in 2012 things were actually kind of okay in retrospect. I'm sure it felt like the world was falling down around us back then, but things were okay. And I just want to take a minute here. I know that this show is talking about silly men running around in tights fighting crime. It's an escapist fantasy. However, this past week in America has been a very stressful time based off of recent political decisions. I won't get into them specifically, but just know things will get better. We just have to stick it out and help out our fellow man wherever we can. So please do hope for a better America moving forward. That being said, let's get back to our escapist tendencies and talk about the comics that came out this week, 10 years ago from DC Comics. We have the number 11 issues of Batwing Detective Comics, Action Comics, Red Lanterns, Green Arrow, Justice League International, Stormwatch, and Animal Man. Additionally, we have the number 3 issues of Earth 2, World's Finest, GI Combat, and Dial H. And we have the number 5 issue of the miniseries Night Force. All that coming up in just a bit, but of course, as is tradition on this show, we will kick it off with Batman. Detective Comics number 11, written by Tony S. Daniel, art by Julio Ferreira and Eduardo Pansica. Last issue left off with a dude named Hugh Martyr, who's been around, being strapped into a black hole generator. I guess it's whatever they want to make it. And a guy comes up and irradiates Batman. Okay, so this issue picks up Batman still being irradiated, but apparently he has something in his utility belt that will allow for the deflection of radiation. He activates it. It works, and it causes Mr. Toxic to just fly off. And then Batman starts laying in the hurt, and he's like, oh, I'm going to beat you. Oh, I'm not feeling so good. And Mr. Toxic's like, yeah, dude, you just took a whole bunch of radiation. I'm going to beat you up and kill you now. And he goes and attacks Batman. But Batman, of course, he's like, my body may be slower, but my mind is always one step ahead. And he takes this metal bar, and he cracks it across Mr. Toxic's helmet. And when it breaks open, we see inside the mask is Hugh Martyr, the guy who's strapped to the particle accelerator over there. And at that point, he, as far as I can tell, explodes. He literally, like, the body just explodes. And then he looks over at the particle accelerator and he sees Hugh Martyr still strapped on there. And he's like, okay, I guess I'll stop this then. And he walks over, but there's nothing he can do to stop the accelerator. And it also explodes, throwing Hugh Martyr out into the middle of the room. Batman steps up and he's like, what did you do? What just happened? And he's like, it's too late, Batman, but I finally have the power I needed. Ha! And then he dies. And at that point, of course, Lucius Fox and a whole bunch of like security guards pump in. And they're like, all right, everyone, this place is radioactive. Batman busts out a window because he's still too weak to deal with this. And he grapples up to a helicopter that Alfred just happened to be like sitting there waiting for him for. So then we go back to the Batcave, and we see that Bruce is basically decontaminating. And he's fine. There's no more radiation in his system. I don't think it happens that way, but regardless, he's fine. And he's like, okay, something's going on here, and I need to figure out what it is, because there were definitely 2 Hugh Martyrs there. So he goes back up as Bruce Wayne this time, and he's talking to Lucius Fox, and this is just techno jargon, like the whole way through. Like, they're just making up crap that particle accelerators can do. Like, he's like, oh yes, the particle accelerator, you know, black holes and time travel and creating and killing universes. And Lucius Fox is like, yep, all those things. And I'm like, yeah, all right, sure, whatever. Anyway, Bruce Wayne gets a call from some mysterious person saying life or death matter. And when Bruce takes the call, he's like, we have to meet today, Mr. Wayne. This is about Hugh Martyr. My name is Professor Alan Smart. Click. So he goes over to Dunhill Labs, who had their stuff stolen. I think that was last issue. And apparently Professor Alan Smart just disappeared and is presumed dead after possibly committing corporate espionage against Dunhill Labs. So he walks up and talks to the people who are actually at Dunhill and is basically just trying to get out what they know about anything that's going on, including Alan Smart. And they're like, we don't know nothing. I mean, it certainly seems like whatever you're describing happened in Wayne Tower is probably what happened here. So keep an eye out for that. And then Bruce Wayne just leaves. But as he's leaving, he apparently tracked down the payphone that the call to him was made from, which is right across the street from Dunhill Labs. And over there, he sees a homeless man. And he goes and he follows the homeless man, which is Professor Alan Smart. Sidebar, you named your professor Smart. Why? Anyway, so Professor Smart's saying there, and he's like, okay, here's the deal. Remember how we said time travel? And that one seemed silly? That one's actually true. So, yeah. And then he throws in, for some reason here, that the time travel, it's like, it's messing him up, and it's not like allowing, while he's getting it to work, it's tearing apart his body. And so Hugh Martyr has actually managed to learn how to clone himself. And all of these things are perfect clones. And then Bruce Wayne, like an idiot, says, but I saw Hugh Martyr die yesterday. To which Alan Smart rightly says, yeah, or maybe it was a clone. So anyway, we get to the Gotham City morgue, and Bruce Wayne gets like a flash drive from Smart. It contains all the secrets of everything or whatever. So then we go to the morgue, and we see that there are like 5 copies of the Hugh Martyr guy, and he was like all the guys who were dressed as Batman. He was Mr. Toxic. He's Hugh Martyr, the main dude. Like, he's all of them. So the morgue guys are like, well, either they're quintuplets or there's something weird going on. Regardless, let's run some tests. And as they're about to do so, another Mr. Toxic shows up, reanimates the corpses as far as I can tell, and then kills the morgue guys. And the one corpse is like, I'm alive. Why? This is unnatural. And Mr. Toxic is like, you can't die or I'm going to die. So put on this crazy looking suit, not the Mr. Toxic one, a different one, in order to protect you from the radiation. Sometime later, they're investigating the morgue, Batman and Jim Gordon, and they're like, yeah, so there was a bunch of radiation and shit going on. We've got some bodies here. They've all melted, just like those other guys melted last issue. And Batman's like, okay, but like these bodies that are still here, because he didn't reanimate all the corpses. He just reanimated like 1 or 2. It's like these bodies over here are Hugh Martyr, and they're both literally the same. Like, I'm just going to run some blood samples here. So he picks up a blood sample, takes it back to his Batcave, and he's like, my God, they are duplicating at an enormous rate, blah, blah, blah. I must run the test on this. And he drops in a sample of, I don't know, whatever. It is some sort of science hoo-ha. And he drops it in the DNA thing, to which it immediately starts rapidly turning into a like liquid-like substance that jumps off the petri dish and begins enveloping Batman, seemingly drowning him. As we leave off. Okay. If you want to just make up science, that's fine. You do whatever you need to do. But don't take stuff that like already exists and say that it does other things. Like, I don't say, by the way, I have a webcam that also allows me to see what's happening on the moon. It's like, no, the particle accelerator does something. Just come up with some new thing. Just something, it's a who's a what's it, and it allows for time travel. Good, done. Cloning too, throw it in. It just bothered me that they were just like, no, particle accelerators, this thing that is very well researched. It's able to do all these crazy other things as well. Maybe that's just me. It's a tiny nitpick maybe, but it bothered me the whole way through that they were just throwing out all this crazy stuff that could never happen and just being like, yep. End reveal here of the liquid, and it just attacks Batman. Like, it just feels like somebody who didn't pay attention in science class, where it's like, hey, maybe don't just randomly mix together this rapidly multiplying thing with radiation poison. It just seems a bit weird to me. And I don't know. This whole issue just felt like a whole bunch of like, okay, well, I guess that's what we're doing now. Not in a good way, not in a bad way, just okay, sure. I guess somewhat in a bad way. I'll go ahead and give this one a 6. A lot of that comes down to the art, which is still good, but I do have to point out it's just not... I don't know what we're doing with this arc. Clearly Hugh Martyr was set up long beforehand. We had some ideas, but I'm just wondering if we ever actually ran these ideas past anybody else before we decided, nope, this is exactly what we're doing with them. Batwing number 11, written by Judd Winick, art by Marcus Toe. Last issue we left off with Batwing and Nightwing stuck against a clan of hired killers and a dude who's a literal dragon. Yep, and then we see that Penguin is somehow involved in all this because he's selling stuff to some international whatevers. So this is basically broken up into 2 completely separate plots. I'll just tell you the Batwing one first, but just know they're interspersed here. Batwing and Nightwing are fighting their way through the crowd. Batwing is in charge of the dragon guy. And he is barely holding his own the entire time. And he makes a point of being like, yeah, I am not capable of surviving this. Like, we just need to hold out long enough to get the internet traffic from that Chinese national guy who was on the boat. And then we're out. Like, we're bailing. So, long-ass fight scene. They do some cool things of him, like, trying to come up with clever maneuvers to get away from the dragon guy. Until finally the little computer flash drive goes ding, and he's like, cool. And he busts into the room. He uses sonic stuff to repel Dragon Man. And he grabs Nightwing with the flash drive, and they just zoom their way out of there. So then some time passes, and we see that they follow the internet traffic to find the partners of Long, and they are a group of mercenaries in Uzbekistan that I guess worship death or something. I doubt they're ever going to show up again, but regardless, Batwing breaks in their computers, sends the encrypted files over to Batman. They unencrypt them, and they're like, Batman, do you see what I see? These look like schematics for... And Batman's like, I know. I'm going to go talk to him. And then we go to Penguin's Iceberg Casino, where Batman literally busts in and starts beating the crap out of Penguin. And he's like, why'd you do it, Penguin? You're a terrible man. But why'd you do this? This is too far. I'm going to put you away for life. And Penguin's like, whatever you think you have on me is never going to stick. Wah, wah, wah. And he's like, don't you understand what you've done, Penguin? You sold someone a nuke. Which is a step up. I'll give him that. So... Batman, they don't know who the nuke went to, but they just know that Penguin sold someone a nuke. And that's where that story leads off of this issue. The other half of it is, if you remember last issue, some governor of Africa, of some African country, died. And turns out that they were the family of Mateus, a.k.a. the Alfred to Batwing's Batwing. And the other half of this is basically him saying, like, yes, they were my family. I am the estranged son of that African governor, but like, that was my old life. This is my new life. You are my new life, Batwing. And as it turns out, there is a country called Tundi who has a deranged warlord named Lord Battle, who, like, it's closed off all the borders. No one's allowed to enter or leave. But because Lord Battle was good friends with Matu's dad, Matu's family is going to be buried in Tundi, and Matu is allowed access to, say goodbye to his family. Batwing's like, well, I'm going, clearly. This dude is bad news. And he's like, no, you are my new life. David, you must stay. I will go. So Matu goes to Tundi on his own. And as soon as he gets there, the dude is immediately like, yes, I'm so sorry that you've come here for such a tragic reason, but you are the first person to enter my country in many, many years since its true birth. And basically, Matu's already just taken it in. He notices that Lord Battle has a team of, like, metahumans protecting him called Bloodstorm, which, okay. And he's like, all right, so yes, feel free to look around, but you will be guided around by your escorts. And Mateus like, yeah, okay, escorts, wink, wink, making sure I don't get into anything too much. But then he smells something in the air, which is apparently, as he calls it, crude oil. Later on, he manages to sneak away from his escorts, and he's on the phone with Batwing because he smuggled in a phone. And Batwing's like, hey, I'm flying over there. Like, I'm coming over to you because I know you said no, not to come, but, like, clearly I wasn't going to just sit out of this storyline. And Mateus like, yeah, here's the deal. I grew up in an oil country. I know what it smells like. They've got oil here. And Batwing's like, their main exports are diamonds and some other thing. But, like, they don't, metals. They don't have oil. And then Mateus stumbles across a giant, like, oil farm where they're drilling for it. And he's like, well, what am I looking at then? And then Mateus gets shot in the shoulder. He seems okay, but, you know, he gets shot. He crumbles over. And then we see Lord Battle pick up the phone. And he's like, whoever this is, forget about Mateus. He may as well be dead. And forget anything you heard. No one will come into my country. And Batwing's like, do you want to bet, bitch? And that's where it leaves off. And it says next issue, Justice League International, because I guess they're getting involved as well. Okay. It's fine. It's okay. I'm confused by the plots a little bit. Like, we had a pirate ship that had a Chinese national on it. And that Chinese national was linked to Uzbekistan nationals who were linked to Penguin, who's linked to a nuke. It's just a little bit too much touch and go of... We're just leaving a lot in the dark here of, like, who's actually doing what here? Like, if we just boiled it down to Penguin sold someone a nuke and we ignored all the different nations and whatever, I'd be fine with it. But it just seemed a little bit of, like, what are we doing here, guys? As for the Lord Battle side of things, it seems like it's going to be a fun little romp. Like, just a closed-off country. He's taking a warlord to task. It's, as far as I can tell, typical Batwing. So I'm enjoying it. It's fine. Art-wise... It's still solid. I have no problem with Marcus Toe's art throughout any of this. The coloring is good, but it does feel a little bit bright in times where I feel like it should maybe be a bit darker. Maybe that's also on inks. I'm not entirely sure. But if that's the style they're going for, I can't fault it. It's just my own personal taste. I think it should be a little bit darker. Mainly because of that first arc where it was just gorgeous the whole way through. So, yeah, overall, I'll give it a 7. It's fine. It's good. It's not blowing me away, but it's exactly what it's trying to be. It feels more... I'm assuming that they're going to be tying these plots together. The nuke probably is going to Lord Battle. If I'm just throwing spitballs here, I'm guessing that the nuke's going to Lord Battle. But if it's not and these plots are completely divergent, then a little bit more disappointing. But I will deal with whatever it throws my way. Action Comics number 11, written by Grant Morrison, art by Rags Morales, Rick Bryant, and Brad Walker. Last issue had Superman ask Clark Kent jump in to save somebody who I think was like suicide bombing themselves. Somehow, as we find out later, that guy survived, but Clark Kent, his secret identity, did not. So this issue picks up with a excavation-based villain, as far as I can tell, named Metalek, who is just rampaging through the city. Superman just jumps in, rips out like the central processing core, crushes it, and yeah, the day is saved. But because he's excavation-based, he's destroyed many houses nearby, and all the people are like, Superman, you may be able to leave, but we're all homeless now. What do we do? And he's like, well, citizens, if we all just chip in, we can build an even better housing district than before. And everyone chips in for, as far as I can tell, is like 15 seconds, to which then Superman has built them all a significantly better home. And they're like, oh, well, what's the value on the houses now? And he's like, I don't know. I'm going to leave now. Bye. And so he just takes off, and he says there's smoke nearby. So we're dealing with now a fire. And as it turns out, as we see, a firefighter's getting some people out of a building. These people want their cat, whose name's Smelly, who's still inside the house. I can't even tell if they ever got Smelly out. Genuinely doesn't look like it. But regardless, we see this guy just leaping over fires with 2 people on each shoulder. And as it turns out, this guy's name is Johnny Clark. this is Superman's new secret identity, because maybe he was a little bit gung-ho to get rid of his old secret identity. But anyway, he's a firefighter, and everyone at work is like, hey, you want to come down to the bar? And he's like, nah, I'm a loner. I don't have friends. Goodbye. And he just leaves. He goes to the hospital, and he goes to talk to the guy who he saved from the suicide bombing, who, mind you, is apparently a longtime family friend of Clark Kent's, and yet he does not recognize Johnny Clark as Clark Kent. But he's like, oh, you should have saved that boy instead of me. He was something real special. And then we just stop dealing with that. And then Superman meets up with Batman. Now, there is one thing I want to point out here, is that in the earlier scenes here, Superman is wearing his t-shirt and jeans look. But then in this shot, when he's talking to Batman, he's now wearing the armor, like the actual Superman suit. So I don't know if like that was supposed to be a long time ago in the first scene, or if it's supposed to be now. Whatever. Point being, he's talking to Batman. He's like, "Hey, I don't know if you know." And Batman's like, "I know everything about your secret identity and all that stuff." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I just felt a bit too rash." And he's like, "Yeah, no, you gave up all your friends and family like in an instant. Maybe you shouldn't have let Clark Kent die." And he's like, "Right, but here's the thing." I don't really feel like Clark Kent serves a purpose anymore, because, like, I don't live in an apartment anymore. I live up in a space station with, like, 200 miniaturized cities in it. And Batman's like, okay, seriously? Like, where is that? And he's like, it's right over there. And Batman's like, how do you get up to that thing? He's like, I kind of just jump/fly. You would have to build a spaceship, though. And he's like, I'll work on it. So then him and Superman bust into crime fighting or whatever. We don't get to see that, but, you know, they're teaming up. So then we cut over to a little girl who's trying to name her hamsters some cute little pear name. And she's really torn between the names Scooby and Shaggy, Baskin and Robbins, and Hitler and Satan. She's leaning towards Hitler and Satan, which is strange to me, but regardless, she's apparently the niece of Lois Lane. And this girl is talking a lot of, like, deep things. She's like, man, what if they had every name all at once? What would that name sound like backwards? What about this? What about that? And Lois is like, okay, little Susie, that's weird. Did you draw these crazy, intricate geometric drawings? And he's like, no, I didn't draw them. The spaceman in my dream showed me how to draw them. And he's like, okay, Susie, movie's in half an hour, let's go. And then we zoom in on Susie's eyes, and she has stars in them. Okay. So then we see Superman up in his ship, and he's talking to Brainiac, the onboard AI, and basically he's like, hey, can you tell me what's up with Earth? Like, why it's important? Like, why are we on this doom list thing? Also, what are the other things on the doom list? Why are they doomed? And he basically just goes through and he's like, all right, there's this thing called the Multitude. It's showing up. Nobody has ever managed to beat it before. Nobody's ever survived when it shows up, so it is the end of all worlds. And he's like, all right, did it destroy Krypton? And he's like, no, Krypton was a different thing. But the Multitude was coming for Krypton. But your dad, Jor-El, he repelled it before it ever even arrived by doing what many people said was impossible. And Superman's like, impossible, huh? So then last issue, there was this dude who was hitchhiking to Metropolis, and he finally shows up here. And he tracks down Lois and Susie, who are coming out of the movie theater. And Lois has this whole thing. She's like, wait a minute. You're the guy, the ghost of the, what is it? I don't even know. The ghost of something or another. Blake Farm ghost. That was it. I can feel that it was you. I don't remember this. I have no idea what they're talking about, but regardless, it's there. But anyway, the dude actually came from Susie, because apparently Susie is a star child who came from hundreds of thousands of years in the future, and he's just here to basically, like, pick her up. Meanwhile, Johnny Clark is in a fire engine responding to a fire when they happen to pass by this whole scene, and the fire truck transforms into another Metalec, which then the dude, the space guy, he immediately just shows up, tears the fire truck in half, but it does still manage to hit Lois, who is pushing Susie out of the way. And he's like, see, I'm super strong. I'm here to protect you. We are mutants. New mutant from the future. I said all this before. So anyway, he starts having this weird pink thing about him as Superman changes into a Superman thing. And he's like, look, here's the deal. I'm like super telepathic. You may be able to beat me up physically, but your mind is like way open. So I'm just going to use that to basically knock you out. and he causes Superman to collapse on the ground, and all these other mind-controlled civilians start attacking him. And then this dude just grabs Susie and goes to fly away. And he's saying it because, the multitude's coming or whatever. So, that's the thing. Okay. Sure. It's so hard to break down how I feel about any sort of Grant Morrison thing because it's just so much to take in at any given time. So, all right, Johnny Clark. I like the concept because, Superman being a fireman. It's an apt comparison of that's basically what he's doing. I like his little talk with Batman. That's fine. I think weird futuristic mutant guy, strange. I think Lois having this niece Susie be from this hundreds of thousands of years, strange. I'm not saying bad for either of those, but it's definitely not something that's been fully fleshed out yet, and I'm still trying to figure it out. So, overall, collectively, all of it, I'm going to go ahead and say 7. Part of that is higher because of I like the fireman angle and stuff like that, and him dealing with the fact that he did let Clark Kent die. I enjoy those aspects. But then the lower parts that cancel it out are this weird stuff with Susie and the mutant and all this stuff. I don't even know if he has a name. He may have said it. I genuinely could not care less. Metropolis, hear me, future child. There you are. I don't know. He doesn't have a name. We'll get to it. Regardless, it's a 7. We'll see where it goes from there. Red Lanterns number 11, written by Peter Milligan, art by Miguel Sepulveda. Last issue was a pretty much just tie-in crossover with Stormwatch. Genuinely don't really think it mattered much. So just jumping into this issue, we have a group of Green Lanterns making their way over to Yzmalt because Guy Gardner, was talking about how he met a Red Lantern, and he's recounting that information. And as they arrive, they see that the planet is basically being completely destroyed. And they look around and they see, the ghost of a Red Lantern just, leave a handprint on one of the Green Lanterns. And they're like, okay, let's bail. And then they leave the planet. And that's it for the issue for them. So then we go to one of the main arcs, which is on Zamaron, aka the home of the Star Sapphires, where Bleez and her compadres, her little group of Red Lanterns, are being held captive by Fatality of the Star Sapphires. All of these people we know from Green Lantern New Guardians. And basically Bleez is like, you suck, Star Sapphires. And Fatality's like, we were on a team, Bleez, I love you. And she's like, shove it, I hate you. So then we see that one of the Red Lanterns, he's corrupted by the poisoning. He starts falling apart, and he just literally dies right there with no one being able to save him. And then Fatality's like, oh, okay, you guys are actually, in trouble. Okay, I will promise you I will convert any female Red Lanterns that would like to be converted. And immediately one of them, I can't even remember his name, the orb-looking guy, he's like, what? We would never convert. Never in a minute. Wait, did you say only females? What kind of sexist stuff is this? So, at this point, Bleez is so pissed off that Fatality's, doing all this. She breaks out of her chains, and they just start a full-on fight. And Bleez is like, oh, okay. So, you don't believe in hate and stuff like that, but you throw a mean left hook. I'm sure you don't have any rage in your heart. Wink. And then there's a point in here where they're inside of a crystal, which they clearly are not yet, but they will be later, which is very confusing to me. So they're inside of a crystal here, and Bleez manages to scrape her own blood and mix it in with Fatality, and she's like, now we're blood sisters in rage, and you will all of your inner rage thoughts will come to the surface because of my blood or whatever. Sure, whatever. So then we get over to Rancor, who's just waking up from being unconscious on a meteor, and he's like, what happened between last issue and now? Oh, right. We were attacked by the Star Sapphires as we came to their planet, and they, pretty much just destroyed us. Whoops. So then we see him like I gotta go fly, I gotta go find somebody. And as he looks out, there's this beautiful 2-page spread of just a galaxy of stars, and he's like, I think I might be alone. Like, I don't. It's light years to the nearest star. I might never see anyone again until I die. That's a humbling thought. But anyway, then we go over to Atrocitus, who's been going through sector after sector to planet after planet, just looking for Abysmus. He's been looking for 2 days, and we get, recap. Abysmus, he was built with a flaw, he could feel empathy, and then he was buried, and Atrocitus is pissed off that he broke his power battery. So then Scalix and Dexstar show back up to Atrocitus, and they're like, hey, we can't find him anywhere. To which point, the guy that he's interrogating, he's like, all right, screw this. I'm just going to use blood magic. So he slits open the throat of the guy he's interrogating and asks the universe via blood prophecy of, show me where Abysmus is. There's a little scene in between here that I'll get back to, but when we get back to Atrocitus, he essentially is like, come on, I'll throw in my own blood to sweeten the pot. And he puts in his own blood magic. And Scalix is like, you're not looking so hot, boss. You may want to cool it with the blood magic. But finally he gets an image in there, and he's able to see himself being defeated and broken. To which point Abysmus, who's like standing right in front of him now at this point, is like, yep, and that's what's going to happen right now. So he starts, they get into a fight, and Abysmus is ready to throw the first punch, but then, Atrocitus is ready to throw the first punch. Abysmus just has some weird tendril things come out of his stomach, wrap up Atrocitus, and he's like, You are the only family I ever known. I love you, and now I will put you out of your misery. And that's technically the end of the issue, but I did skip over 2 pages here, where, first and foremost, Bleeze and Fatality, they're talking, and then they're put into the crystal. That one from like 2 pages ago, specifically here, they're put into the crystal. And we see that they're talking, and like Bleeze is trying to convince Fatality, like, no, rage, that's what it's about. And Fatality's like, no, love is what it's about. And we see them just talking as they're fighting, and they realize like both of them were raised to be someone they didn't want to be, and they were both harmed in a lot of ways. And as such, like, Fatality's like, you're right, I do have rage. I do dream of getting my revenge on those people who wronged me. To which Bleeze is like, no, revenge isn't the answer, Fatality. Take it from me. So maybe they're having a heart-to-heart, but that's all we get of it on that page. Then we get Rancor, who's finally managed to make his way to a place, and he's like, oh, I see bodies. Maybe it's Red Lanterns. I'm sure they're all just sleeping. He genuinely thinks they're just sleeping. And as he comes up to one, he sees it's just a corpse, and how he's just basically in an asteroid field of nothing but Red Lantern corpses. And he's like, oh, my fear turns to rage as I know I might be next. And Abysmus is the one responsible for all this death. Maybe this death will lead to him. And he goes off to find Abysmus, as we already know, is attacking Atrocitus. So I genuinely think there was like a misnumbering of pages somewhere along the way there, because there's no, like, either that it's an art error of why were they in that crystal thing before they weren't, and then we had that reveal of like the blood magic or whatever. I think that page with like the blood sisters from Bleeze was supposed to be after the whole revenge isn't the answer sort of thing, but then it didn't make sense from that standpoint, because why would Bleeze say revenge isn't the answer, then just to turn right back and say, do you feel rage in your heart? Like, something in there wasn't making sense. Maybe I'm nitpicking here, but like, it genuinely felt disjointed of how we flowed from A to B to C, when it felt like it should have been A to C to B. So yeah, I don't know, that's just me. The Atrocitus stuff is okay. I like his desperation of blood magic. He's just like, it's all I got. I'm just going to go for it. And everyone's like, dude, chill. Jesus. The Rancor stuff's fine. The 2-page spread, fantastic. But right now, it feels like they're just like, we had to have a human Red Lantern because humans are so special and readers have to relate. But we don't actually know what to do with them yet. So we'll get there. That's all it feels like right now. But overall, it's fine. It's an okay issue. I'm going to give it a 6.5. It would be higher if it weren't for what I genuinely believe is that error between Bleeze and Fatality. I just want some form of confirmation on that. Anywhere at all. Just give me something. But yeah, no, it's 6.5, and I'm still liking it, but it did feel very disjointed as an issue as a whole. 2, number 3, written by James Robinson, art by Nicola Scott. Last issue we left off with Alan Scott about to propose to his boyfriend, and then the train he was on straight up exploded. So this issue picks up with the train and Alan Scott, who's in intense pain and is like missing limbs and half of his face is burned off, and he's crawling out of this wreckage, and he's like, oh God, where's my boyfriend? Oh geez, where are you? And as he makes his way over a ridge, he sees a green light that he thinks is rescuers, but when he gets there, he sees this giant burning green flame that speaks to him. It's just like, Alan, you're the one. To which Alan's like, okay, I'm hallucinating, huh? And they're like, don't worry, I'll prove you're not hallucinating by taking away your pain. And he's like, that's not really going to do anything, but oh, that does feel good. Thank you for that. So he's basically just telling him, like, hey, look, giant green flame, I don't know what you are. Oh, wait, no, I do remember. When the train exploded or derailed or whatever, I remember there being a green light. He's like, yeah, that was me. I was saving you because you are super duper important. And he's like, well, if I'm that important, help me find my boyfriend. He's like, yeah, sorry, your boyfriend's dead. I could save you because you're important. Your boyfriend, not so important. So just telling you that. Anyway, there's going to be an evil thing that comes to Earth. And it's going to try to destroy all life, and it's going to need you. And Alan's like, what? Why didn't you show up before when we had like apocalypse attacking? And it's just like, I am, and this is the green light, I am the energy of Earth itself. When apocalypse was attacking, you had a sun god on your side. To which he's like, you mean Superman? Not really a god, but okay, whatever, sure, I'll take it. But now he's gone, you're going to have to take his shoes, you're going to have the Earth's energy on your side as Earth's new defender. So then we cut over to Flash, who last issue stopped running really suddenly, ended up, I think, in Poland, and ran into, she reveals her name at the end, but it's Hawkgirl. And there's a point here where he's like, wow, are you an angel? To which Hawkgirl says, are you an idiot? And basically just tells it like, no, my name's Hawkgirl. Look, here's the deal. You've clearly got some sort of powers. I'm here because fate showed me where to find you. And he's like, I don't believe in that, but thank you for hitting on me, I guess. And she's like, let's go meet fate. And they're like, no, okay, that sounds like a thing. I don't want to do that. And he reveals he got the powers from Mercury. And Hawkgirl's like, wait, you got your powers from a god? And he's like, yeah, is that weird? Yeah, it's a bit weird. So he gives his just real name, Jay Garrick. He's like, no, what's your, like, superhero name? And he's like, I haven't really thought of one yet. And he's like, okay, well, let's see if you can fight. And then she just does the thing that every issue has to have a fight in it. So he's like, okay, no problem. I'll just use my super speed to run around her and jump on her back. And he does that, and then she just flips him off. And then he's like, I know, I'll just use my super speed to throw dirt in her eye. And Hawkgirl's like, are you serious, man? Is this all you're doing? He's like, all right, fine, I don't know how to fight. Sorry, jeez. It's like, no, it's fine. Look, I just want to know how well you could fight because we have a fight ahead of us and we need to get you trained up. And he's like, what do you mean I got to get trained? What are you talking about? And then they look around them and like this beautiful lush green forest that they were in, just everything is dying all at once, all around them. So I'm going to cut back to Alan, and Alan's like, okay, Green Flame, I'm in. I'll be your new defender. And so he's like, all right, cool. So I'm just going to bathe you in the light real quick. So he hits him with the flame, and he becomes the Green Lantern, and he gets a costume out of it. And Alan's like, it comes with a costume, and he's like, you're the one who thought of it. Like, I'm playing off your own subconscious here, buddy. You thought of the costume. And he's like, all right, fair enough. And we keep getting cutaways of, like, more and more devastation around the world, particularly focusing on Washington, D.C., where this death wave is just rolling over everything. But anyway, the flame, he's like, okay, here's the deal. I need you to have something close to your heart that will allow the energy to transfer through it. Like, it can't just be your whole body. We kind of need, like, an item. And he's like, well, I was about to propose to my boyfriend with this ring. And he's like, perfect. Green Lantern's ring. I'm just going to shape it so it looks like our branding, and then we're good. So the Green Flame does that, and he's like, hey, Green Flame, you sound like really human. Have you done this before? Have you talked to people before? And he's like, yeah, you'll figure out that stuff soon enough. And he's like, oh, where are you going? He's like, I'm done. I've Done all I need to do. Goodbye. And he just disappears. So then we see, Green Lantern. He goes back to the train incident, because I guess this only took place over the course of like 2 minutes. And he just literally picks up the train over his head, saving all these people. And we see the cleanup effort shortly after, where he's kneeling over the body bag that holds Sam. And he's like, I'm sorry, Sam. I couldn't save you. But I will do this all in your honor. I love you. So then we see this death wave still rolling over DC. It makes its way all the way up to the Capitol steps. And there's this ongoing narrative that's just like, yes, the Jade Champion is ready. He will come to me. I will purposely be here in this place of high publicity, so he will come to me. And then we will fight, and I will kill him yet again. For he represents the green, and I represent the gray, the death, the rot. And we see these vines of, like, death vines, not like green vines, but like, scary looking stuff, overtaking the Capitol and crushing it down. And he's like, come after me, man of green. I am the man of gray. Solomon Grundy. Okay, a lot of reveals there. Solomon Grundy, of course, being like a zombie man who represents death apparently now. If you didn't know before this, in Animal Man and Swamp Thing, typically representative of the green. Both of the books are currently fighting the rot, which I guess in this book is the gray. There's a whole bunch of similarities to other stuff going on in other books. I like it. I definitely like this turn. I think the Flash bit was probably the weakest bit, but it wasn't the focus, because clearly the Green Lantern part was. And having Solomon Grundy just be this thing that shows up at the end of like, all right, I'm the villain. Let's do this for the first arc. I don't know. I kind of like it. What I don't like is Solomon Grundy's current design. My ideal picture of Solomon Grundy is animated series Grundy, where he's just this big hulking, like white-skinned dimwit, more or less. He's from Hellraiser in this. It's a lot of leather and a lot of belts. He's just from Hellraiser. I'm not as okay with that, but mild complaint, all things considered. So overall, I do enjoy this issue. I think it's very well done. Art is fantastic the whole way through. It does a good job setting up the stakes of, giant death wave or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I give it a 7.5. I really do enjoy it. I think it's coming out the gate strong. I'm hoping that it can keep this sort of momentum moving forward with the rest of the Earth 2 universe, because this doesn't have the benefit of other books helping to flesh it out. Anything it wants to do, it has to do on its own. So I'm hoping it can keep this momentum going well enough to keep me interested. Green Arrow number 11, written by Nocenti, art by Harvey, Tolibao. Last issue genuinely doesn't matter. This issue picks up with Oliver Queen at a charity poker game. And it's for an art museum in Seattle, and he's apparently cleaning up shop. And there are people nearby watching from a bar, and they're like, wait a minute, isn't that Oliver Queen? The guy who disappeared on a plane randomly and has left his company in ruins? Isn't he broke? I guess not. And then Oliver overhears it and says, like, man, stop reading the tabloids. You all suck. I'm fine. And as he's saying this, two people bust in wearing basically Green Arrow garb, but, normal colors. And they immediately, first words as soon as they bust in this place are, we are the 99% and we're here to take it to you, 1%ers. And then they just go on for 3 straight pages talking and like everything wrong with the system of like, why is there always money for war and not for education? Oh, there's no affordable healthcare or anything like that. Housing, forget about it. And I'm like, look, I appreciate the sentiment, but dear God, guys, could you hit me over the head any harder with it? So they go up to these guys at the table and they're like, give us all your money now. And they're like, you do understand that this is a charity poker game, correct? Like, we are giving this money away. And they're like, yeah, for what? And they're like, an art museum in Seattle. And they're like, yeah, when has art museums ever put a roof over someone's head? And this girl kicks one of the guys in the stomach and it tells the other one, like, give me the real jewels. I'll know the difference if you try to give me fakes. So as they grab a bag of money, they make their way out, of course threatening Oliver Queen directly along the way is like, you're the problem, and then leave. And then I think this girl's name is Bunny, by the way. I don't think the dude gets a name. But regardless, they're called Dark Arrows. And apparently they are these other sort, not even vigilantes, just these Robin Hood-esque people who have been going around Seattle, I guess, while Green Arrow was missing. So they're running down an alley, and the dude asks Bunny, like, hey, how would you know the difference between real and fake jewels? And she's like, I was just bluffing. And then Green Arrow shows up, and while they're fighting, Green Arrow and these Dark Arrows, two, as far as I can tell, 12-year-olds on bikes show up and basically give their own running commentary to how awesome the Dark Arrows are. But, like, they also don't, because I'll get to it. So, Green Arrow's fighting against this, like, psh, the Occupy movement is a non-violent movement. You don't stand with them. And it's like, maybe I do. Maybe it's time that we actually take action. And they start fighting, and they are literally just proselytizing of like, oh, your Green Arrow suit looks like it cost $1 million. I made mine with $30 at a hardware store. And then Bunny pulls out a squirt gun and says, like, I bought this $2 squirt gun and filled it up with gas. And she sprays it on Green Arrow and sets him on fire, to which the dude is like, oh, that's too far. Puts out Green Arrow, and Bunny runs away. And when she passes by the two 12-year-olds, they're like, hey, are you with the Occupy movement? Take this bag of cash. And they're like, that's stolen cash. We don't want it. And they're like, well, then distribute it. Do your job. God damn. So Green Arrow tries to give chase. Doesn't work. It does work. They managed to string up Bunny. And when they approach the 12-year-olds, basically just like, yeah, no, look, that chick, she's crazy. Like, she set you on fire. That's too far for us. However, maybe she does have points. What are you doing to help us, Green Arrow? So, sure. Regardless, that story literally just stops dead. I will say there's one page later on where Bunny, I guess, gets out of jail because her daddy is rich. And she's like, whatever, Dad, I hate you. And he's like, I will put you in the psychiatric loony bin. And she's like, no, Daddy, please. And then we see the other guy just dropped off a bag of cash in front of a foreclosed house with people somehow still living inside. And they're just like, oh, it's a miracle. Thank you, Dark Arrows. So that happens. Anyway, the other plot entirely starts up, which is basically Green Arrow just kind of at a bar talking about, oh, yeah, you know, the Occupy movement that's doing all these things, and aren't those kids so stupid doing that, just sitting out in the rain for no reason? To which this woman he's talking to is just like, I feel like they kind of stand for a good cause. And he's like, yeah, no, totally, but like there are better ways to go about it. And he's just like, yeah, okay. Anyway, so that just cuts. Like, there's a mild transition there, and we go to Naomi and Jax, the two people in the chair from Queen Corps, or Q Corps, I think it is. And basically, they just chew him out for the last arc when he just flew off on the jet. And they're like, you were declared dead. Your company is in the trash. Like, you're screwed, man. To which Green Arrow, for no reason, because we've never had this before, is like, no, don't you understand? This is all just a test from my dad. You know, my dead dad, who plays 3D chess and must have set up all of this before he died. And Naomi's like, that's fucking stupid. You're an idiot. And if anything, there's one thing that maybe he was protecting you because we have this. And they walk into a room and they see a jet that's like super duper stoked out. And they're like, here's the deal. Some dude in China bought all the shares of your company for super cheap, and he's willing to sell them back to you, but you need to go and meet him face to face to make this deal. And then we see this engineer guy who also was a former State Department liaison, and he can speak Mandarin, and he's just here working on the jet, because why not? So they fly over into Chinese airspace, and he knows that Oliver's Green Arrow, because sure, why not? Let's see if he has a name. Jimmy Crew is on the crew. So they fly their way into Chinese airspace. He's just testing out some of the trick arrows. And then they talk about how Oliver Queen developed this facial recognition tech that's just super incredible and amazing, and it is absolutely faultless, and he privately controls it. Because, yeah. And then he meets up with this Chinese businessman who's like, yes, I will give you whatever, like, I will give you your company back, and all I ask in return is that super secret facial recognition tech that I will be able to use in my own private company here in China. To which Oliver Queen says, screw you, I ain't doing business with no dirty reds. To which, I mean, he doesn't actually say that, but he may as well say that. To which immediately the guy flips out and he's like, you dare insult me in my own home? Nobody even knows you're here. You came here in super secret jet. I will destroy you. And he sicks some martial arts guy on him. And then the last line here in the narration box from Oliver's perspective is, you got a cliff, hang on it. As in like a cliffhanger? Get? Ha, 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 ha. 1.5. I don't need to justify myself. Justice League International number 11, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Aaron Lopresti. Last issue left off with the JLI being taken hostage by, I think his name was Breakdown, and his gang, and they're going to execute them live on like the Capitol steps or whatever. So this issue picks up with them trapped in like a light box by Lightweaver, and they're just being held hostage in front of this crowd who are basically like, these guys suck. They represent the system, and the system sucks. Do you agree? To which the crowd is like, yeah, wait a minute. Isn't that the Justice League? Don't they save people? And it's like, yeah, they save people, but only the people that help enforce the system, the people that the system says is okay. They are ordained by the UN. That super sucks, right? And the crowd's like, yeah, wait a minute. Weren't they just cut by the UN? Also, you look really evil. To which point, they kind of stop talking to the crowd entirely. And we see the Justice League is just like, okay, so the crowd is going to execute us, despite the fact that the crowd seems pretty iffy on the whole thing. And internally, they're all just sitting there just like, all right, here's the deal. We need to break out of this light box thing. The only one here strong enough to do that is Omak. Omak, do it. And he's like, I can't. I'm too weak. And he's like, it's okay, Omak. You suck. So then they try to pull out, I think it's August General in Iron. Also, some soldiers arrive in order to contain the situation. And they pull out August General in Iron, and Breakdown puts his hand on his head and starts like destroying him the same way that he breaks down everything else. And everyone's like, okay, we need to speed up whatever plan we had going on here. Omak, I know that you're afraid to let out your inner monster, but you got to do it. And he's like, And then Guy Gardner calls him weak. And then he goes, I am Omak. And he breaks out of the light box. And everyone else is free. To which the one named Intersect was the one who was cutting off Booster and Guy Gardner's powers. So immediately Batwing just runs over, punches her in the face. And now Guy Gardner and Booster Gold are in the fight. There's also random cutaways, like multiple times in this book, to some random bar. Not even in Washington, just like elsewhere, that's watching this on TV, and they're just commenting like, man, this is the B-list Justice League, right? Crazy. I wonder what A-listers are doing right now, for some reason. So anyway, everyone gets in their little fights and stuff like that. And then we see that Godiva's got a handle on Intersect. August General gets up and he knocks out Breakdown. I don't even know where the video game guy went. He just disappeared. And then Omak is still on a rampage, and he's just running through town. But Guy Gardner's taken on Lightweaver, and he manages to get Lightweaver distracted enough to knock out his light shield as the soldiers that brought in a tank come in, fire a shot, and just incinerate Lightweaver. Just dead. And they're like, well, he knew the game anyway. So now August General knocked out Breakdown before, but then he pulls him back up again, and then literally just like destroys him with one punch. Like he's shattered into 100 pieces. So there's a lot of murder going on right now. Anyway, Omak, he's making his way through the soldiers, and they're like, Omak, hey, those are the good guys. Stop it, Omak. And Booster steps up, and he's like, Omak, it's over. Kevin, you don't have to do this. And he's like, you are the enemy. And Booster's like, I'm not your enemy. And he takes down his shield, And he's like, I'm here for you, Omac. And Omac throws a punch and it's about to hit Booster's face, but then he's like, I'm sorry, Booster. And he's like, it's okay, we're friends. Also, I'm going to get you pretty heavy-duty therapy soon. So he standing there with all of them. They're like, guys, we won. We did it. We finally have a win in our column. And Booster turns around and kisses Godiva. And, oh, it's just a beautiful day. So remember earlier I said Lightweaver was pretty much incinerated? Well, that whole time he was fighting, his brother was there. And his brother was like, no, don't do this, Malcolm. To which, now that the fight's over, he picks up the body of Lightweaver, carries it down an alley, and he's like, why did you do it, Malcolm? And he's like, now it is your fight, my brother Malik. So he, I don't know, touches his head or something like that, transferring his powers, and then dies. And now Malik is like, I will continue your fight. No one will forget you, especially not the Justice League International. And that's where we leave off. Okay. I wanted so much more for this group of villains. Like, they had so much potential to them. And then they're just like, we're just going to kill them on Capitol steps. And, like, the crowd themselves were like, yeah, wait a minute. No? To which I get, like, no, don't kill the people on Capitol steps. But come on, run with the idealists for a little bit there. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I had such good hopes for these villains. And it's just like, I should have known better than this guy can make light constructs and that girl can interrupt technology. Wow. So overall, it's fine. I do like the OMAC thing they're doing here, where it's the Hulk, basically. They're just making it, he's the Hulk, and I'm okay with that. I think it's handled decently well here, because they've set up this thing where he doesn't want to be this monster. So having him basically Hulk out and not being able to control it, I like that plot. It's solid. Everything else is kind of background noise, I feel like. They keep on trying to push August General, and I'm just not feeling it. Maybe that's just me, but it just feels like, no, he's truly an honorable man. And I'm like, yeah, okay. He's just a guy. He's made of iron. He's Iron Man. But Chinese. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with it, but it's just not hitting quite right for me. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and say this one's a 6.5, and a lot of it comes down to I like the flow of it all, which is hard for me to describe to you, but I do like how it flows. The actual, what they're doing with the ideas, hit or miss. But the flow of it all and the way they're handling these characters, I like that enough to give it a 6.5. So I think we're done with this plot. We'll see what we have in store next. But yeah, it's 6.5 for now. World's Finest number 3, written by Paul Levitz, art by George Perez and Kevin Maguire. Last issue left off with Power Girl and Huntress making their way into a power plant in Japan where this guy named Haku was feeding off the energy. And this issue picks it up with Huntress just basically trying to attack him with her arrows. And she seems like, some of them aren't connecting, but then she seems really confident in this one arrow, being like, not a chance. And she fires it off in this big, dramatic, multi-panel sequence, and it still doesn't connect. So I'm not entirely sure the point of that sequence, but regardless, Haku's like, okay, well, I'm done feeding now, so I'm going to go. And he picks up some, metal bars and just starts throwing them at super high speeds at Huntress. She's dodging out of the way out of all of it, but, running out of room very quickly. But then as she's managing to keep Haku distracted, Power Girl manages to creep up underneath and grab his leg and start crushing it in her hands. It's just like, okay, do what you're going to do and do it quick because this radiation really, really, really hurts. And so she fires off one more arrow, this time up into the cooling system up top of above Haku that then drops down on him. However, the cooling system was also irradiated. So it does nothing but feeds him more. And he's like, I'm so full. Please stop feeding me. And then he's like, all right, well, I hope that puts him out because that's generally all I got. But he runs away. He blasts through the roof of the building and just runs away. To which then Huntress pulls Power Girl up and she's like, hey, need you to wake up. We got to go. This place is like really highly radioactive and I should not be here as a human being. So Power Girl wakes up, picks her up, and flies her out of the building. We then get 45 months ago in London. They're meeting up, just catching up on seeing what to do. And they're like, man, food here sucks. Next time, we're meeting up in Italy. And Huntress, I'm blanking on her name, Helena, pulls out a file and is just like, here's the deal. In this world, Batman has a Robin. But, like, in my world, Robin had to be, like, trained from birth. That's why I am his daughter. In this world, they just adopted some random kid and trained him. Sounds stupid to me, but regardless. And then she tries to pull out the Superman file, to which Kara literally doesn't want to know. She's like, nah, screw that. Like, they're not my family. They're not my Kryptonians. They're not my problem. I'm going to be my own thing. So then there's just a really weird, like, sex joke here where it's just apparently Kara's sleeping around. And she's like, I'm just comparing to see if there's any anatomical differences between planets. That's all. So then she walks away and they say, all right, we'll meet up again in 6 months in Italy. So then we see what Kara was doing, and she's basically just trying to figure out the science of how to get back home, but she realizes she is hopelessly unable to figure that out. And she happens to look down at a Fortune magazine that I can only assume is Bill Gates on the front saying, if you can't build it, buy it. To then she's like, all right, well, how much money does it cost to buy some scientists? So then we see about 2 years pass. She's built up this company, Star Industries or whatever, and she's like, all right, how are the scientists doing? And she's asking her assistant. The assistant's like, yeah, they're working around the clock and they're not making any progress. The only thing we've heard in any sort of grapevine setting is that over in Michael Holt, a.k.a. Mr. Terrific's lab, he may have something similar, but he's not going to share that with not nobody. To which Karen then puts on her skimpiest outfit and is just like, well, we'll see what Michael Holt thinks of me when I really lay on the moves. And that's how we get into Mr. Terrific's entire book. Check that out if you really like punishing yourself, like me. So we cut back to now, and they're flying over to some major city in Japan. And as they're trying to fly there, Power Girl just drops Huntress off in a tree because this jet is literally falling out of the sky and is on fire. She pries open the canopy, gets the pilot out, and then tosses the rest into the ocean. And Huntress is like, yeah, they're scrambling a lot of jets over for the city over there. I can't tell what's going on over there, though, because of the bright neon light. To which Power Girl points out, like, that's no bright neon light. We turned Haku into a freaking kaiju. And he's just marching through Japan. So, yeah. That's a thing. So they make their way into the city. Huntress is doing some street level stuff of just saving random civilians who are caught in the path of destruction. Meanwhile, Power Girl is blasting away with heat vision and trying to smack him with a radio tower, which surprisingly genuinely works. And she smacks Haku and just blasts him all the way out into the deep ocean. So then Huntress and Power Girl regroup and they're like, all right, cool. We've knocked him out into the ocean. What's the plan? And Power Girl's like, I was actually kind of hoping you had a plan. Womp womp, issue over. It's good. It's fine. They keep on harping on this fact of, like, Haku said some stuff about, like, oh, this world is marked for destruction. To which Huntress and Power Girl have taken to mean, oh, he must be from our planet. But then I'm just sitting there like, we've got a universe full of planets just in this universe. Like, when he says this world, it could just mean Earth, not Earth Prime or Earth 1 or Earth. Technically, this is Earth 0. Regardless, it just seemed like a jump to me, and they've never really justified the point of why they think this guy's from a different planet, besides it really feels like it. And he destroyed the portal thing that they could have used to get back home. That's the only things that are working in their favor. The rest of it is iffy. So maybe he's not. Maybe he is just from this planet. Regardless, I'm sure we'll get the resolution within the next 2 issues because this book only collects up to issue 5. So overall, this one I'd say is probably a... I'll give it a 6.5, but it's a low 6.5 in that story-wise, it doesn't feel like it's doing a whole lot. I am just interested in the world building that they're doing of, like, okay, how are we fleshing out these people's backstories of, like, why they did the stuff that they did when we actually caught up with them, aka Power Girl, Mr. Terrific, and Huntress in her own book. But it still is a little bit shaky in terms of now in the present day stuff, like they're just fighting this radiation guy. And okay, that's fine if that's what you want to do. It just seems, I don't know, not the biggest outing for their first adventure. So, and art-wise, gotta be honest, George Perez, fantastic artist. I don't think that the coloring is doing him any favors in this. It's all very bright, and it really matches Kevin Maguire's style, who does all the flashback sequences. It really works for his stuff, but it doesn't work so much for George Perez's style. So a little bit down on that, but 6.5 is where I'm falling. We'll see how it turns out next month. GI Combat number 3, written by JT Krul, art by Ariel Olivetti. This is the War the Time Forgot part 3, and I'm going to try to keep it short because it is actually literally only half an issue. So we open up on a flashback of, or maybe a flash forward even, but I think flashback of Elliot coming in to his wife holding a dog saying like, hey, I found this dog at the grocery store. It doesn't have a collar. Can we keep it? And the wife's like, it's disgusting and gross. No. And they're like, well, what if we wash it? And just wants to give him a chance. So then we cut back to Elliot as he comes across a group of tiny little carnivorous dinosaurs, and they're all eating like a little mouse, and he just steps up and he's like, hey, little guys, don't mind me, and he goes to pet one of them. He's like, see, you guys aren't so bad. To which then Stevens comes in and just like, Elliot, what are you doing? They're dinosaurs, man. And he's like, yeah, they're not so bad, though. You don't have to shoot at them. And he's just like, dude, did you forget the T-Rex thing like 20 minutes ago? But regardless, they're like, all right, look, we got to make a plan. So they pull out a map and they're like, we are 8 clicks from shore. We got to head straight across this valley and we should be able to get over there, and then we'll be able to find a carrier that's waiting off the coast. And the North Korean guy that they're with is just like, hey, what about me? What am I supposed to do? And he's like, look, our countries aren't at war. If we explain the situation, like, you'll be allowed on the ship, and then from there, we'll figure it out. I'm just looking at one crisis at a time here. So they make their way through, and then they see, wait a minute, hold on. Something's up ahead. And they come across this giant, still carnivorous, long-necked dinosaur that starts charging after them. Elliot unloads a couple of shots on him, and they try running their way through the woods, and they get ambushed by a whole pack of them. So they're trying to figure out, all right, what do we got? And he's like, I still got the one grenade. Do it. And they toss the grenade back. It ends up killing one of them. A couple others are still on their tail. One goes after the North Korean guy who only has a pistol, which does nothing, and therefore this guy is eaten pretty much immediately. Elliot runs up, blasts a hole in one of their necks, and it's just like, all right, this is my last magazine. Better make it count. And he doesn't, really. The dinosaur's still attacking him. And he manages to get the gun jammed into the dinosaur's mouth, to which Stevens comes up. And I keep on mixing up their names. I don't know why. It's just neither of them really feel like either of their names. Anyway, Stevens comes up and he's like, here's the deal. I'm out of bullets too, but I got a knife, so I'm far from out. And he stabs the dinosaur in the mouth, or in the neck, which does nothing, but it does manage to get Elliot out of the dinosaur's grip. And then they're on a cliff edge, and Stevens is still riding the dinosaur as the cliff starts collapsing. And Elliot's like, jump off, man, what are you doing? But he doesn't get off in time, and both the dinosaur and Stevens seemingly fall to their death. The end. Okay, it's fine. It's good. It still feels weird to rate these at all, considering how short they are, but for this one, I would say it's probably if I'm scaling up for size, I would say 6. If I'm taking size into account, I'd probably rate it a little bit lower. Like if I treated this as if it were a full comic issue, it'd be a little bit lower than a 6. On its own, taking into account that it's telling a story over multiple parts, I'd give it a 6. Just because, one, it doesn't feel like it's really doing much of anything. It feels like it's just, okay, we're going to take 3 steps and then a dinosaur is going to attack. And we're just going to do that for 6 issues. That being said, I am enjoying the brief bits of characterization we get in the intro scenes that then carry over into the issue themselves. I'm enjoying that. I think that's a good storytelling point. Art-wise, still have some issues with the backgrounds. It feels very computer generated compared to the paint style of the characters themselves. It's got a bit of a whiplash for me. Maybe that's just me, but it doesn't hit right. So overall, 6 for it, and I'm sure we will get more dinosaurs next time. Stormwatch, number 11, written by Peter Milligan, art by Eduardo Pansica and Ignacio Calero. I'm really picking up on the fact that this is just an episodic series where each issue doesn't really matter to the issue before or after, save for character development. So I'm not even going to bother recounting last issue because it really does not matter. So this issue picks up with Neanderthals 30,000 years ago and how they fell to Homo sapiens and they lost the war for the planet. But they didn't die out, apparently. They kept their lines purebred and they kept continuing with their culture or whatever, but over time it slowly died until finally they became the Hidden People. And in the 12th century, a group of the Hidden People were approached by someone. It doesn't even say who this is, but regardless, a group of them were approached and were just like, hey, you're going to be the brute of the group and your name is Bloodline. You're going to be the magic user and your name is Flame, and you're going to be the last one and your name is Soul, and the last one's able to use a gun or something that they can power with their mind. So I guess psychic is the best way to say it. Also, they make a brief mention here of yes, their enemies are the Homo sapiens, the human usurpers, as they call them. But they also mention the Untitled, which is the villain from the Red Hood and the Outlaw series. I don't know why they mentioned that, but now you know as well. And they're like, okay, here's the deal. We're all going to work on a weapon, and that weapon will take down the Homo sapiens. And they come up with this weapon called the Devolver, which I'm going to go ahead and quote them here. They will be reduced to sitting in trees, eating fruit, and laughing at their own farts. So that's a thing. But anyway, before they manage to really get it used, Stormwatch comes in and they start attacking them. But before they really even have a chance to use or to Stormwatch to get it, Neanderthals just blow up their place where they're staying and just fake their deaths or whatever. But apparently they go into hibernation and they're able to pass down their abilities through generations or something like that. It's very unclear. But we've reached present day where a group of Neanderthals are using the powers, the exact same ones we saw before. And they're Bloodline, Soul, and Flame. And they're attacking Stormwatch on this natural gas drilling platform out in the ocean. Because I guess whatever plan they need requires natural gas. It's not really explained. But Martian Manhunter's trying to get in their head, figure out who they are. And it's like, wait a minute, hold on, they're Neanderthals. That's weird. So we see Bloodline specifically is fighting against Midnighter and Apollo, and it seems like he's getting his shit absolutely wrecked. I'm not sure he lives through this, honestly, but regardless, apparently they got all the natural gas they need, and Flame is able to use her magic stuff to basically teleport everybody out. And Martian Manhunter reveals, hey, I did get into their head, and I saw this big angel thing with metallic wings standing over a highway, to which Apollo's like, oh yeah, I know that statue. It's called the Earthbound Angel. That's probably where they are. Let's go. And then Martian Manhunter says, hey, by the way, I also saw in their head something about an engineer and Stormwatch being dead, so maybe pay attention to that. So then we see the engineer who's looking through the records of Stormwatch, and apparently there was a recent iteration of Stormwatch during the 40s who was wiped out by the Neanderthals called the Hidden People, and they also had an engineer whose name was Archie Trundle, and he was just an Air Force guy who Stormwatch came up and was just here's the deal, we'll give you an arm if you help Stormwatch. Rather than her own story, which she says is she just woke up one day, she died more or less in the thing, but she was brought back to life via all these machines, and now she's more robot than person. But then she fell in love with Harry, and Harry made it all okay, and she felt human again, until Harry betrayed them. You know, that whole story that's been going on for a while. Meanwhile, we cut over to Harry, who, if you remember, got in contact with the villain, the Fox, who Stormwatch framed as trying to steal the moon. So he's doing experiments on the Fox, and he's like, oh, I'm going to make you a super genius, Fox. I just need to poke around your brain for a little bit. And Fox is like, okay, sounds good. To which then the projectionist who's with Harry at that point is just like, are you just dicking with him? And it's like, yeah, no, I'm totally just dicking with him. He can't know exactly what's going on here. And the audience, of course, is not brought in either. And then he asks projectionist, like, hey, is there any news from our former colleagues? And she just lays out the whole exposition. She's like, Harry, you made me fall in love with you so that I would go along with all this stuff here. But I'm no longer your hostage. I'm here to help you with your project. How much other things here have been lies, like you're lying to the Fox? Was your love thing with Engineer even real? To which Harry then whips out a sword and nearly like kills her. And it's just like, we don't talk about Angela. We don't mention her. So, bit threatened. So then we go back to the engineer who's looking through this previous engineer's life, and she absorbs his arm from the Stormwatch morgue to try to get like whatever residual memories are left there. And she sees their last battle was them fighting against the Neanderthals, and they activated the devolver. And just for the brief time that it was on, they like stopped being able to speak. They stopped being able to like do all this stuff, and it just very quickly got rid of all their higher brain function. The engineer managed to make his way onto a plane and started like taking off. But before he could like really get that far away, he forgot how to fly a plane, and therefore it crashed and he died. So anyway, the group's made its way over to the Earthbound Angel statue, and before they can even walk in, the Neanderthals are inside. They've powered up the devolver and they just activate it. And we see everybody here is just devolving into more base forms. An engineer, she opens up a portal because she wasn't with the rest of the team. She opens a portal right next to the devolver cube. She absorbs its energy, and therefore, I don't know. It's some weird like body horror thing of her like kind of devolving, but not quite. But like she's still very grotesque or something like that. They say she went into some kind of anaphylactic shock, but next page, she's just back at Stormwatch HQ throwing up a bunch of blood and guts. And everyone else is severely grossed out by it. But regardless, yeah, she's fine. So she's like, okay, I want everybody to run some tests on themselves to make sure we weren't hit too hard by devolving rays. And then Midnighter chews out Jack Hawksmoor for not being there. And it's like, yeah, no, you were in the middle of like nowhere. There's no city. I wasn't going to be of any help to you. And Engineer's like, yeah, no, that's fair. You wouldn't be any help. And then they're like, okay, well, the Neanderthals are going to be back because we didn't catch them. So let's be on the lookout for that. And then we see that they're back in hiding again. Bloodline is still recovering from their attack. And then we see like, of course, we will finally be there when whatever this engineer turns into, because she absorbed the cube, it will be catastrophic to their group. We will destroy Stormwatch once and for all. Ha 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 ha. It's fine. It's okay. I'm wary now because I just got used to the fact of, okay, this is episodic, and then this one seems like it's continuing onwards. So it doesn't feel wrapped up, but it also at the same point wrapped up like, okay, the devolver thing is done. But like, is it? Or is it not? They're leaving so much on the table here that I don't know what's going to continue and what's just a random throwaway for the issue. And that is getting to be a bit of a problem because like when it came down to like the Red Lantern rings 2 issues ago, it came down to a bunch of this other stuff. Like it was just, they're opening up a lot of things and then not closing them. And that's maybe can lead to like a cool finale, but it's very confusing for me now. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 6.5. If we continue on wholesale from this story, I'll think that number's justified. I think 6.5 is okay. It confused me. That's why it's a little bit lower than like a 7. But if it just drops all this and does yet another episodic thing, I honestly would like revise this down to like a 5. Because they're setting up so many big ideas and then they're just like they're giving all this exposition and they're not delivering on any of it. They're just like, oh, here's a big idea that we're just going to tuck away and not come back to. Like, just do something with it. That's all I want. Animal Man number 11, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Alberto Ponticelli. Last issue left off with Cliff being kidnapped by one of the Hunters 3, and Animal Man saying, hey, my son's in trouble, give me a new body, to which they agreed. So this issue picks up with the Tailors being called in and basically saying, yes, Animal Man, we're the ones who gave you your powers before. We will do so again, but what should we do this time? Maybe we'll make you a brunette. But they basically come down to the decision of, look, we're going to give you back the powers, but we're going to give you a more durable link to the red. So therefore, you can do like a lot more, including some shape-shifting is going to be involved a little bit. So they just start like poking and prodding at him and like literally like just stretching his flesh out in a typically horrific fashion. So then we cut back to Ellen and the entire rest of the group, and like, Cliff, where's Cliff? Maxine, can you reach out in the red and try to find Cliff? And she's like, you told me not to use my powers. Like, yeah, well, I'm changing my mind. But at that point, Socks is like, oh, hold on, I've got the scent of the rot. The rot has your boy. And he starts to transform into this giant behemoth of a cat, and he's like, the rot's near, I'm going after it, I will hunt. And he makes his way out. Then we get this 2-page spread of Buddy as just a consciousness somewhere in the red, and he's like, I exist, but I don't have a form. And he just like slowly reaches out to more and more creatures of the reds until he finally evolves into himself. He starts as a nanobe, turns into a fairy fly, a salamander, a bird, some sort of gopher. Finally he reaches chimp, and at this point his higher brain function is like this word in my head just ringing, I have to find Cliff, Cliff, Cliff. Until finally he gets back into this human's body, and he's like, all right, after Cliff. And he falls out of the tree that Maxine led him to in the desert, down to the sand. And as soon as he gets out, he uses his powers, and he's like, I'm stronger. Speed of cheetah. And he like kind of transforms into a cheetah and just makes his way over to Cliff. So meanwhile, on the outskirts of town, Socks has managed to make his way. He's tracked down the scent to where Cliff is. And Cliff is just standing there. He's like, what are you doing here, furball? And he's like, the rot. I smell the rot. And you went missing. I'm pretty sure you're kidnapped by the rot. And he's like, no, I'm fine. Look, my dad's here. And then the Animal Man that's possessed by one of the hunters is like, yeah, I'm here. Nothing to worry about. And so then we cut back to the family, who's like, I can't believe I lost my husband and my son. This sucks. I'm a horrible mother. And her mother's like, no, that's not your fault. That's all Buddy's fault. To which Buddy then arrives. And he's like, yeah, no, totally. This is all my fault. And he looks like half bird at this point. So he arrives, he hugs his family, and she's like, please, like, stop doing the hero thing. I'm so tired. He's like, look, I get it, and we're totally done with the hero stuff, but I need to do it this one last time to go save Cliff. And she's like, fine, just bring me back my boy. So Maxine gets her dad some pants, and then he flies off to go find Cliff. And meanwhile, we see Cliff is finally realizing, like, wait a minute, your flesh is kind of dangling off your face. You're not my dad. And Socks tries to get in the way, throws a punch. The hunter just breaks Socks' arm. At which point Buddy then arrives in the form of a rhinoceros and just shows up and be like, you let my son go, I swear to God. And he's like, oh, your children make you weak, Buddy. And it's like, you have no idea what's coming. And he just slowly draws a cut down Cliff's cheek, to which point Cliff starts crying for help for his dad. And then Buddy just goes full gorilla and uppercuts the hunter's head off. So Cliff runs back, he hugs his dad, and then the hunter's head tries to crawl back to the body like the Thing style. And he's like, ooh, all you had to do was give us the girl, but we've taken so much more from you now. The rot world is coming, and our master is along with it. And Buddy's like, who is the avatar of the rot? Tell me who it is, and I'll fight him. I'll knock him on his ass. Just give me the word. And he's like, you're not going to be able to find him. That's going to spoil the fun. To which point, Buddy then sets down the head on the ground, turns into an elephant foot, and just crushes it. And Cliff is like, I don't think I'm going to eat pizza ever again. So Cliff and Buddy make their way back to the family. They all hug each other, and Buddy promises, like, no, we're done. It's over. Really, it's done. Let's just go home. And Maxine hugs Socks, who's gone back to her smaller form. And she's like, oh, they hurt your little arm. She's like, please be careful with me. But then at that point, Cliff his head starts spinning, and he's like, I don't feel very good. And his eyes roll back, and he's like, I can see him coming arcane. And he passes out as the family just gathers around him, like trying to shake him awake. And it says, next time, Swamp Thing. So here's the deal. Next issue marks the prologue, prelude, whatever you want to call it, to the big finally crossover event of Rot World, which is between the main story of Animal Man and Swamp Thing and the crossover being covered, as well as tie-ins and Frankenstein, I believe. So be sure to tune in for that. I'm certainly interested. This particular issue, I think was good. I think it was a solid way of just, okay, it took the thing, it got Buddy back on the board, it set him up with some new powers, it set up the threat of what's coming. It managed to involve Cliff now, who up to this point, it felt like a pretty tertiary character. So I'm interested. I'm down for it. This book has never disappointed so far. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one I'll give it an 8. I think it's really good. My only real critique in that is I think that there was a lot more story potential in Buddy getting his new body, but they went with a philosophical angle of like, oh, he's making his way through the red web. I think it just could have taken like another 2 or 3 pages of just showing like the tailor's crafting it. I think it was right for an extra little something. They decided not to, and that's fine. It's still an 8, but I do think that that was a cool enough concept that they just kind of brushed over because they needed this to be done before the crossover. So, yeah, 8. Liking it. Dial H number 3, written by China Miéville, art by Mateus Santolucci. Last issue ended with Nelson running to the dial. He's met by a mysterious woman who seemingly knows about it, and they're both being hunted by some sort of gang. This issue picks up with the gang fight, where before Nelson can even make it over to the dial, it is shot to bits by the guns of the gang, and he's like, oh geez, it better work, and he runs over and tries spinning it, but it ain't doing nothing. At that point, the mysterious woman jumps in. She transforms into her own hero that has hoses for arms and legs, cause okay, and uses it to like shoot water at the guys. She's like, grab the dial, let's go. And she grabs him, and she uses her hoses to fly up into the air. And then the gang makes a call over to XN, who we know is X Nihilo, and basically describes the situation like, hey, that lady, her name is Manteau, she just got out, she escaped. And it's like, okay, doesn't matter. Where were they? And it's just like, they were down in an alley. We got to go. The cops are coming soon. It's like, wait, first grab the dial. And they're like, oh, they took the dial with them. Sorry. And then we see XN talking to, his name is Squid. He's that weird lizard guy from last issue. And they're basically just talking like, okay, well, we have our own mysterious plans that are all shrouded in darkness. X Nihilo wants to bring back something about the void. He wants something to exist from nothing. And Squid apparently wants to go home. And they're working together, and that dial is necessary for something. So then we follow over to Nelson and Manteau. They're flying over just straight over to Manteau's house. And she's like, okay, the key's underneath the mat. I don't have hands right now, so if you could please let us in. And he's like, wow, that's a cool hero you got going on there. What's her name? The Extinguishnesses? And she's like, no, my name is Manteau. Like, I am not this power set. It does not define me. You need to keep track of your own identity. So at this point, she depowers down and immediately repowers again because she has her own little personal handheld dial. And she's like, yes, this is my own dial. No, it will not work for you while I am using it. Don't panic. I can fix yours. And she's like, you can fix, okay, here you go, cool. And then she starts talking about the history of the telephone. She talks about different people who like worked on long distance telecommunications and stuff like that. Edison, Graham Bell, a couple other names I don't recognize. And apparently in their secret diaries, they all talked about a meeting with a man named O. And they always shared ideas with O, and O shared ideas with them. And whatever came out of it, O always left them with enough of an idea to come up with some brand new thing in telecommunications. But it seems like he was looking for something of his own. And it all comes back down to this dial. Whatever this dial is, it predates all of them. So she's like, oh, well, okay, please tell me more about this dial. Tell me everything. I want to know how it works. I want to know what's up. And Mateus like, okay, but real quick, tell me, what was your biggest fight you've been in? And immediately Nelson goes off of like, well, that would be when I fought the Rake Dragon along with the other members of Team House, and I was Boy Chimney, and we went down and we fought against them and turned the tables, and then he just starts talking more and more, and he finally freaks himself out, and he's like, what was that? Like, I didn't do that. That wasn't me. He's like, yeah, no, Boy Chimney, your persona that you transformed into, he was the one who had that memory. He was the one who is like living inside you. You need to be able to keep track of who you are. So she introduces herself. She's like, that's why I wear this mask, why I wear this cloak. It reminds me that every time I look at myself, no matter what, I'm still Mateus. That's who I am. I'm not Boy Chimney. I'm not Extinguishes. I am Mateus. And so she introduces herself, and then Nelson just goes, I'm Nelson. So then we meet back over with XN and Squid. They finally figure out, apparently, I'm just going to tell you the Cliff Notes version of this because it goes in way deeper. So apparently there's this thing that happens, possibly with the dial, possibly separate from it, where people who see it are primed to become portals for this darkness. That granny in the first issue who like spewed out the darkness, she was a portal for this darkness, this abyss. However, if you actually, it relies on just knowing about it. If you know about it, you're primed to be a portal. However, seeing it leaves you to be actually too unstable, and therefore if you see it and you're unstable, you can't really share it with anybody so that they know about it. But eventually, XN and Squid track down this guy who has heard about it, and he was in close proximity to something that was related to it, so he is aware of it, but he never actually saw it. So therefore he is primed as a portal to this darkness. So they are on their way out. They pose as some sort of federal agents who are there to help him with his brother, who I think the brother was the one who was involved in this thing. And they, as soon as they find him, they just kick down his door and start running like tests and stuff on him, being like, you are it. You're the one we need. What they're doing, I will reveal in the end. But yeah, it's a thing. So then we get back to Nelson, who is apparently at the gym. He's trying to get more fit. He gets a call from Mateus that it's been it's been a couple days. She thinks maybe that she fixed the dial by now. And Mateus reveals that she is a telephone engineer, and she keeps red flags on the entire telecommunication network in order to find anybody that comes to basically their town in Oklahoma, because this is like a hot spot for like dial activity. Whatever is going on, it's here. And so they come across the same guy. His name is Mr. King. And it's like, I picked up a telephone communication that he was on when these people bust into his house and started doing stuff to him. And they said something about the dial. So clearly this is about him. So then she hands over the dial to Nelson, says like, look, I don't know exactly how these things work. I managed to fix one once, but I think I got lucky. We got to try it with yours. And he spins the dial and he transforms into something. But when he does so, it's very brief, very temporary. And when he does, he sees this weird shadowy figure blinded in light. And he's like, okay, you saw that thing? That's called the shadow on the line. And it's something, it's what XN, it's what Squid, it's what all of this is connected to. That's why the dial is necessary for them. So we got to go and we got to take care of that. You need to use the dial, despite the fact that it's not fixed yet, because it's just required in order to fight these guys. So he spins the dial and he turns into a female hero named Baroness Resin. To which there's a whole page here of just like him freaking out. It's like, well, clearly you didn't fix it well enough. I'm a woman. And she's like, really? You have you transformed into a human spring yet? Have you transformed into an actual boomerang? Like now you're upset because you got a pair of ovaries? Deal with it. This is how it works sometimes. Woman up. She actually says that. So anyway, we finally see what was going on with Mr. King, and she explains more of the story of like why he's important. And then our two heroes show up and they start unleashing the fight, but it's too late. They're already doing whatever they need to with Mr. King, and it turns out that within the void there is a creature, and it's the creature that they saw, the shadow on the line, and it is called Abyss. And Abyss comes out of Nelson, and he is his own formed creature, and clearly it's not good. Whatever is happening, this is not a good thing. So that's where it ends. This is the first issue I feel like I understood the beats. Like, there's always been some point that's lost me before along the way, and this one, like, very got close. But the more I, like, read closely and made sure I was understanding, I finally understood, like, okay, they're explaining the things, what the villains want, what the heroes know, the powers themselves, where they came from. This is the explanation part, and I am very grateful for it. I think it is very well thought out, and it has this much overarching story of, like, it's essentially, there's like a mimetic virus of, if you know about it, you have it. And it's a very interesting concept to deal with. And there's this creature who is literally of nothingness. So no, overall, very cool concepts. The art, fantastic. I like the idea of identity as well. It's got playing with a lot of cool concepts, and I really do enjoy it. I'm going to give this one an 8. A lot of that comes down to the fact that I did actually understand it all. I'm not going to lie on that, but it is still very well told, and I like the themes they're playing with. So I can't wait to see how we continue from here. Night Force number 5, written by Marv Wolfman, art by Tom Mandrake. Last issue left off with our two leads back in time watching the one lead's father die in a time loop, and Baron Winters is stuck in the past and knocked unconscious by some gatherers. This issue picks up with Baron Winters still unconscious, being literally walled up in this castle dungeon that he's in, and they're just going to let him asphyxiate down there, because I guess there's going to be no air in the end. And then we cut back to today, where we meet a new character of Annabeth Saunders, who doesn't seem that important. And she's at a carnival with her brother, and she's very newly pregnant. It's only been 12 weeks. She hasn't felt the baby kick yet. The brother goes and hops on a ride while she hangs back and wants to go meet up with somebody. But then she feels the baby kick or something. She starts to feel a bit woozy. And then these like clown mascots that are all around just pick her up and take her over to an RV near the carnival. And we see that inside is this group, this people who are breeding these sort of creatures. And they're like, okay, so get her in here. Let's run some tests. Apparently, she's got a very healthy thing inside her. And they're all going to run some extra tests. They're just making sure everything's okay. And they mind wipe her and send her back out there and say, like, just say she was dehydrated. So just showing the reach that they have. So meanwhile, we got back to our leads back in 1956. One guy, Jim, is still reeling from the fact that he just watched his father die again. And as he's just sitting there, and I think it was Zoe is trying to comfort him, the weird shadow demon things come crashing out of the house and start coming after Zoe and Jim. But immediately, as soon as they do, they are brought back to present day, back in the Winter Manor, whatever it's called. And so at that point, they're like, okay, let's go find out what's going on. And they go calling around the mansion for Winters, but they can't find him anywhere. And at that point, Jim's like, here's the deal. I saw in my father's papers something about Madeline Green, who is the mother of Senator Brian Green. So I'm going to go deal with that. You stay here in case Winters comes back. Okay, cool. So then we see him go back to his police station, and he's talking to some people. He's like, hey, were you on the security detail of that senator? And it's like, oh yeah, and he's such a you get up there and you hear him talk, and he's just so great. Too many people have been living on handouts in this country. And then this other guy comes in and he's like, you talking about Brian Green? That guy sucks. You should listen to this other senator. That guy knows what he's talking about. And they immediately just get into this very heated political debate where they're like right at each other's throats. And Jim's just standing there like, guys, shut up. Let me get what I came here for. Let me get the info I need. And if you want to go back to this afterwards, go ahead. But just keep me out of it. So they run the info and they find out that the man that they charged with that Jim's father charged with raping and kidnapping that one woman, the DNA evidence that they had came back, and the blood, it didn't match. So basically, that man was innocent and he was framed for whatever crimes it was. So Jim gets on the phone with Zoe. Zoe's like, hey, I'm reading this thing called the Book of Night that I found. I think it's Baron Winter's journal. I don't think he's human. So he's like, yeah, okay, we'll deal with that later. So anyway, I found out some stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and see what I can deal with. There's something else I got to look at in terms of Senator Green. You just stay put there. So as she's hanging up the phone, we see that there's some gatherer I think it's a nurse actually. There's a nurse inside of the house, and it sprays Zoe with this black goop, and so she is officially captured. So then we go over to the Senator Green thing where Jim's keeping a watch out, and he's been having more and more migraines, which is a consequence of him being this, Generation 9 or whatever, and he's being pushed too hard or whatever. And they're like, look, we can't replace him. He is like 2 seconds away from becoming president of the United States. What we need to do is do this special ceremony thing that will take all of the dormant people that we just let out into society, and they'll steal their souls, and we'll use it to power him up so that he's good again. And they do just that. And they apparently have to kill 131 people, stealing their souls in order to get this guy back to some level of good. And he doesn't know about any of this. He's unconscious for the whole thing. So his wife is just like, good, all right, go ahead and wipe his memory and send him back out there. And everyone else, great job. We just saved the life of the next president of the United States. So Jim, seeing some of this happening, is just like, what in the hell is going on? And as the wife leaves, he's like, I'm going to go ahead and follow her. But then we see the senator wake up, and he still remembers some flash of it. He doesn't know exactly what he's seen, but he remembers a flash of it. So then we see where the wife went to, and it's another woman had gone into like premature labor with one of their generation, I think it was like 9s or something like that. And it's basically non-viable. It comes out, it's a miscarriage more or less, completely stillborn. And she's like, God damn it, we do not have the resources to spare on this stuff. Go ahead, kill it and kill her. She's of no use to us anymore. Hey, didn't we just recapture that Zoe girl? She's the one who gave birth to like a good generation 10. We should just keep using her. And Jim hears this because he's managed to sneak up into the mansion behind them, and he's just like, oh, okay, they have Zoe again. Guess I should go get her. But he knocks over a bottle. It crashes, and they're like, oh, there's an intruder. Go ahead and get him. And they knock him out, and they're like, wait a minute, hold on. This guy's a cop. If we just straight up like missing persons him, there are going to be people asking questions. We need to leave a body. Go ahead and take the woman who just miscarried, the little miscarried fetus, and then Jim, set this place on fire and let them all burn. So then we see, the fire's set. But then we cut back into the past. Baron Winters is just pounding down the door. His cat wakes up and just like, oh, good, you're awake. Help me claw down this door so we don't choke to death in here. This is a mess. Like, we've only got 2 issues left, and we've barely done anything. We need to help somehow, so please help me. And that's where the issue leaves off. I'll give them one thing. I agree that they only have 2 issues left, and it feels like they haven't done anything, because I am like, I don't quite know what they're going for here. It's honestly feels like just a bit of a mess overall. It's not, I don't know. It's like the first issue, it felt so haphazard because it felt like it was just laying out the mystery. It's just like, okay, here's this crazy thing going on, and we're not going to explain much of anything. But then at some point we did get the explanation issue, and I remember that, and I appreciated that, but we still didn't do anything about it yet. And now that we only have 2 issues left, like, I don't know what we could possibly do here. Like, what's the end game? I don't even know what the goal here is. I feel like it's stop this guy from becoming president, but like, is it? Have they directly said that at any point? Because I don't think they have. I think it's just been a thing of everyone's been in the dark as to what their plans are, and there's not really anything of them doing anything about it. So I don't know. I feel as lost as the characters do here. And with only 2 issues left, that's not good. Like, I have a grasp on the generalness of what's going on, but it doesn't feel like, I don't know. This is the point where I feel like there's that scene where they're like, okay, the Death Star plans, there's a exhaust port right here. We're going to go and we're going to blow it up. Like, this should be that issue. But instead it's no, we still have no clue what we're doing. We're just finding out stuff still. So, yeah, I don't know. If they can turn it around, I'd be grateful. But for this particular issue, I give it a 5, just because I don't get it. I'm not sure what's going on here yet. I understand the basic setting, but I don't feel like there's a plot here. I feel like it's just a collection of this guy watching the day-to-day events of this weird-ass alien cult thing. Cool. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this July 4th, 2012. And it was okay. It wasn't the best week, wasn't the worst week. It's just a lot of middling books. Actually, out of all these books, only one of them, I think Justice League International, is going to be let go within the next few months. It's having its final issue, I believe, after the 0 month, which is coming up very soon, and I have something special planned for that. But regardless, enough about this week's books. Let's talk about next week's books. Next week, we have the number 11 issues of Batgirl, Batman, Batman and Robin, Superboy, Deathstroke, Grifter, Suicide Squad, Legion Lost, Demon Knights, Frankenstein Agent of Shade, Resurrection Man, and Swamp Thing. Additionally, we have the number 3 issue of Ravagers and the number 10 issue of The Shade. I genuinely couldn't tell you which of those are being canceled in a few months, but hey, we'll figure out in a few months' time when we just suddenly stop reading them. Anyway, gonna wrap up the show now. Let me tell you where you can find me. Here, I'm right here. Congrats, you found me. Also, I'm on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast. You can talk to me about your thoughts on the comics that came out this week, next week, any week. And Patreon, Mild Fuzz TV. Hopefully, if you donate and mention that it's specifically because of me, I might get the table scraps of whatever they choose to give me. Because right now, it ain't diddly. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and or listening. Please tune in next week where we talk about all those fun comics again. And as always, try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.